Hello everyone, and welcome to this Generation UK panel discussion. This forum is an opportunity for you to hear from alumni of the British Council's Generation UK and English Language Assistance programmes about their experiences of studying and working in China. I'd like to start by thanking you all for joining us here today, both those of you who are here in person and those who are watching online. I'd also like to thank our panellists, who are alumni of British Council programmes in China, who have gone on to achieve great successes in their careers, for taking the time to share their experiences with us today. But before we begin today's event, I'd like to give you a bit of background on Generation UK. We launched the Generation UK campaign in 2013 with the aim of developing a generation of young people capable of driving forward the UK-China relationship. We set an ambitious target of boosting the number of young people gaining experience in China to 80,000 by 2020. As we enter the penultimate year of the campaign, I'm pleased to say that in the past 5 years, there has been a significant rise in the number of young people gaining experience in China, with more than 55,000 gaining experience in China since 2013. But there is still so much more to do. So we organised this forum as part of a series of events to look back and reflect on the achievements of the first 5 years of the campaign. But the purpose of this forum is not just to celebrate the campaign's successes. Instead, we're looking forward to continue the Generation UK legacy by inspiring you, the next generation, to take up the fantastic opportunities that are available in China. So I'm very happy to see prospective participants in the room today and also watching online, who are taking a step towards gaining valuable international experience. And for those of you that are interested in the programmes that the British Council offers in China, there'll be the opportunity to talk to British Council staff after the event. I hope you will enjoy today's discussion, and I encourage you to think of some questions for our panellists about their time in China. Now I'm delighted to hand over to Gary Zunwa, a Generation UK alumnus who participated on the programme in 2014, to make some opening remarks. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Hannah. I'm extremely pleased to be here today and to chair this panel discussion with you all, talking about the opportunities, of course, in China. I would like to say a massive thank you to the British Council for inviting me here today as a part of their 5-year celebrations of the Generation UK campaign. Alongside my fellow panellists as British Council alumni, I'm really excited to cover our experiences in China and the opportunities available to you. For those of you obviously in the room today and those of you that are also online, today is an opportunity for those of you who are considering opportunities in China to hear from former participants like myself, Justine, Kathy and James on what it's really like to live in China, the highlights as well as the challenges of studying, working and teaching in China, and of course the impact it's had on our futures and current careers. But before I share with you kind of the perspective and overall transformational impact China has had on me, I want to give you a better insight of how this all came to be. After graduating from the University of Leicester with a degree in management studies and politics, I was adamant that before starting my career, that I had to get a global experience. I had to understand a bit more about the world that we're in. So I went online and I researched, sat down and looked for programs that could take me abroad to experience the world. And I came across the Generation UK program and quickly applied. Truly, easily one of the best experiences and decisions I've made yet. Fortunately, I was accepted onto the program, and not long after, I was off to China to study Mandarin at Suzhou University, and it was really a life-changing semester. Reflecting on my experience living in China, I've since realized the impact the program has had on me from a myriad of different perspectives. First of all, I've grown personally so much. My confidence, my emotional intelligence and adaptability has grown so much from the experience. And I've seen that directly translate into the workplace, where I'm so much more resilient, very proactive, and I'm ready to dive into the deep end in many different things. And I really do see that confidence and growth in myself stemming from my experiences in China. In terms of skills, studying in China has really helped me be a lot more confident and adept with connecting with and building relationships with people from different backgrounds and cultures. And as the world continues to become globalized, this just continually grows in importance. And working at LinkedIn, which is a global company where we operate on a global scale, being able to connect with people from different backgrounds has been truly valuable to myself. Finally, my perceptions of China has completely transformed. Only through living and studying in the country did I really get a good understanding of how diverse and welcoming the country was, as well as vibrant. And just looking back at what I thought it would have been from the media and what I would consume from the news, it was a world apart from that. So you really have to understand it from yourself to get a real understanding of how unique China is. Overall, one of my biggest takeaways about living and studying in China is about aligned to the vast amount of opportunity in the country. Not just from the sense of it being a business market, but also as a place where, as an individual, you can grow and learn and develop yourself. China is no longer a core curriculum. Is no longer an elective course, it's core curriculum. We have to be learning about it now for our future opportunities. I hope the discussion today with myself and the rest of the panelists will provide some insights for you about studying and working in China. And I look forward to answering any questions that you do have for all four of us. We'll begin today with a few questions that we've prepared, and then we'll take questions from the audience as well as those of you that are online. So if you are watching online and have any questions for us, please do send them in. We're really eager to hear your questions and to answer them for you. We'll also have British Council staff members in the room. So if you have any burning questions on eligibility or program specifics, they're qualified and we want to answer them, but just save them towards the end for the British Council staff. They're best positioned to answer that for you. And with that, I am delighted to invite my panelists up onto the stage where we will answer some of your questions. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us this morning. I would love just to start the panel by opening up with introductions, just introducing yourselves, your experience with China and the British Council programs.
So I'm Justine. I graduated from the University of Dundee in English law. I went on the Generation UK program in summer of 2015, where I interned at a law firm for 2 months. And I've since been back to China working and traveling.
Hi, I'm James. I'm currently a parliamentary assistant at the House of Commons. So my first experience of China was in 2015 with the Study China programme, where I heard about Generation UK from the British Council out there. So I finished my degree in 2016, applied to do the internship, and then went out to Beijing in October of that year. And it was probably one of the best experiences of my life.
Hi, I'm Kathy. So my first experience of China was also the Study China programme, but back in 2009. I'm here today primarily to talk about the English Language Assistant programme. So I taught English at a Chinese primary school in Shenzhen in 2012. Since then in London, I've worked with CRCC Asia, so that's one of the suppliers of the Generation UK programme. The Dragon Trip, a company which runs backpacking and educational tours in China. And I've recently set up my own destination marketing agency focused on China as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the introduction, guys. As you guys would have known, there's a few different experiences on the panel in regards to how we've engaged with China. I studied there, both Justine and James interned, and Kathy taught English. So there's a wide variety of different perspectives, but also I can imagine motivations. So what initially was the appeal to going and engaging in China? What was your motivation behind that? I'll start with Justine.
So for me, my goal was always to be, I want to be a solicitor in London, in the city, and I knew that the legal market was hugely, fiercely competitive. The graduate schemes are absolutely saturated, so I wanted HR to notice me, and I wanted to stand out, so that's why I decided to do international work experience, because I stalked a few people on LinkedIn, looked at their profiles and saw quite a few of them had done international work experience. But I chose to intern in China specifically because I was aware of its emerging superpower economic status, its rich culture. I love going to diverse cultural places, traveling, and also I was aware that a lot of international businesses and law firms are starting to set up offices there.
Yeah, in my case, much the same, I think, sort of differentiation. Kind of realised at the end of my first year of uni that I hadn't really done anything interesting. So I figured I basically needed to do something that would help me stand out. And I thought, going to China, completely new environment for me. I'd never left Europe until I went to uni. And yeah, I just thought like language skills are really useful. The ability to show adaptability that comes from living abroad, basically, are all really useful. So that was essentially my motivation.
Yeah, for me, so I hadn't really had much interaction with China until I did the Study China programme. I was 18 years old at that point, which I think is quite a formative age. And people who go to China around that time, I think, especially if it's maybe your first trip out of Europe or to a very different culture, it leaves quite an impression. So it was really the Study China programme that for me opened up my eyes to China, but also just to a world of international opportunities. And then I went back to university. I studied Chinese history, which inspired me to go back to China the next summer, again to Beijing. And it was after that it became more of a career interest. So that's why I chose to go to Shenzhen after graduating with the British Council, which again opened up other vast and diverse experiences in China.
Brilliant. And Justine, just wanted to follow up on one of the points you made there, that it was to help you stand out in the job market, very fierce and competitive market, the law space. Was there anything in particular about your experience in China that you think was the crux? That's what helped you in your applications to get where you are now?
I think it just grabs people's attention.
Right.
I think especially in the West, people maybe have a perception that if you can handle China, you can handle working there, handle the different culture, the different language, the different environment, the heat as well, then, and especially at such a young age, if you can deal with that, then you can probably be resilient and deal with a lot of different things, especially in law, a lot of problem solving, a lot of things spontaneously coming at you. So I think it's definitely adaptability, resilience, all these things that makes you stand out.
That's fantastic.
And in my interviews, it was discussed in every single interview.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Similar actually for myself when I was interviewing at LinkedIn, they always brought up the fact that you were going or have been to China, because at that point, and I still think now, it helps you stand out. It's always interesting. Why China? What are you doing there? So great to hear that you had that similar experience as well. Positively as well.
Yeah.
But as you can see from our different perspectives, there was a few different motivations, right? So yourself was to stand out in the legal space. You hadn't done much for the first year of university. How did we all find, or how did you get to hear about the opportunities that the British Council have on offer? How did it come to your attention?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll start with Kathy.
Sure. I think I actually received a newsletter probably from the British Council. So I'd just recommend signing up to newsletters and maybe following on social media and seeing these programmes advertised. I think now with the Generation UK programme, there is a lot of promotion. For me, when I went to China, it was quite early in terms of outward mobility programmes. So it wasn't something that I think a lot of people were aware of. But I was quite excited about kind of international opportunities at university. I went to Spain and Italy and India, so there is a lot out there as well. So I think just kind of keeping yourself in the loop is really worthwhile.
Yeah, pay attention to everything. Like really seek these things out, because there are a lot of opportunities out there. But I think the British councils are by far the most sort of holistic and well funded. And yeah, just literally just follow, keep an eye on the sort of social media channels and stuff. In my case, I discovered the Generation UK China program in China, which obviously isn't the most conventional way. So yeah, I guess just seek these things out, because they are out there. You just need to actually put the work in and really put time into your applications, and they really do pay off when you do them.
Yeah, I think I just Googled international work experience, and then it came up with CRCC Asia, and I was looking at the website and thought, cool, I can't afford any of this. And then I saw that there was a page that said funding, and they listed all the different providers who help with assistance of going on the programs, and British Council was on there, and that's when I found out about Generation UK and read into it.
Brilliant, that's great. And it's quite similar, I'd say, for myself. It was a mixture of proactiveness, just Googling, but also I'd give a massive shout out to the British Council. They're very proactive themselves. You always see them on social media. They visit universities as well. So that's how I heard about it. It's kind of an amalgam of all the different experiences here. So we've all we were motivated to stand out. We wanted to learn more about China, and then we researched. The British Council came to us in many respects. When you look at the experiences we've done, and then how we've gone on to assume the beginning of our careers, to what extent do you think that the experience that we had in China has affected our careers to date, our employability, and our future prospects? And I'll start with you, Justine.
In terms of my employability, for those of you who don't know about the law sector, your jobs you apply 2 years in advance. So I didn't get a training contract in my second year at university. Then I went on Generation UK, came back, and I was offered 3 vacation schemes and 2 training contracts. So the proof is in the pudding there. For me, definitely improved my employability. In terms of now my ambitions going forward, before I was very UK, London-centric. Now I have much more of a global perspective. I would love to work with Chinese clients in the UK, or alternatively, in the future, I would love to go back, work in China in the legal or business sectors. It's now my ambition for September 2020, when I qualify as a solicitor, to at least have sat my HSK3 exam and be studying HSK4. So it's definitely taken a bit of a tangent. I much more want this China side in my life going forward now.
With regards to employability, I think the Generation UK China internship was probably one of the best things I've ever done. So I work in politics right now, and as I'm sure you're aware, politics is quite interesting right now. I think the adaptability I gained from just living in a new culture, just going on the commute every day. I don't know if you've heard things about the Beijing metro, but it's quite intense. And I think the work I was doing as well, it wasn't just being in China, but the standard of the internships are really high. So I was working for a PR firm, and I was working with clients like the BAFTAs, like Merck Pharmaceutical, really high profile companies. And that helped to stand out as well. So I was doing PR work, like high standard, real, actual work, rather than just doing making tea and stuff. So I think that's another perk, is that the internships themselves actually have a really high standard. So you don't only get the sort of cultural adaptability side, but you also get some really solid professional experience as well. And that's fed really well into politics, because politics is so heavily about the ability to write press releases, about the ability to write columns, the ability to write statements for the British Kebab Awards. Like literally anything that happens, literally anything that comes your way, you're going to have to be ready to do. So yeah, I think the adaptability is really important.
Yeah, I think for me it was twofold. So when I lived in Shenzhen with the British Council, that's the mainland Chinese city which actually borders Hong Kong. So both being in Shenzhen and having that easy access to Hong Kong, it took about 2 hours door to door, but by China standards that's quite close. But I'd go to Hong Kong quite regularly. So at some points I found myself going twice a week. I'd go to networking events, both with my university. I went to the University of Warwick, and they have a strong alumni community in China. So I think if you're in China, do try to seek out those networks. I went to expat events, and that gave me a chance at still quite a young age to really articulate to myself and then to more senior people who I met, different professionals, what I wanted to do with my career. So it was a really good practice at, I guess, selling myself, selling my experience. And then when I came back to London, I was quite set on having a job here that related to China. And very quickly, at a networking event actually, met someone from CRCC Asia, which opened up a role that I had for 2.5 years. And then from there, a role opened up at the Dragon Trip, my next job. So I think if you look back in hindsight, all of that path kind of stems from that time in China, which is really nice. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think I've had similar experiences with all of you guys in terms of China opening up doors in many cases in terms of our interviews and so forth as well. One thing I would say is should you assume one of the programs, definitely be prepared for a pivot in your interests, right? So a lot of us wouldn't have perhaps had such a focus on China beforehand, and just like Justine, I'm very focused on China, narrowly Asia broadly. Going forward, probably wouldn't have had this focus had I not done the program. Of course, I think your career has taken a very Chinese twist, if you like. So it really does have that impact on you because it broadens your perspective on just the opportunities that are out there. And in many ways, a lot of the opportunities that are burgeoning are in the Asia part of the world. So just be it if you are looking and active to do one of these programs. A lot of things may change for the good, of course. And going back to looking at the Generation UK campaign, one of the biggest kind of objectives of the Generation UK campaign is to break down some of the barriers to UK students in regards to getting international experience, specifically in China. And from your experiences, having studied abroad or worked or taught English through British Council, what would you say are some of the barriers that would prevent perhaps people from the UK to study abroad or to gain international experiences? And do you think that you would have studied or worked or taught in China had the British Council programs not been available to you? Perhaps we'll start with James.
I mean, the first one that comes to mind is the cost. It's obviously really expensive to travel anywhere, but to be able to pay for an internship, to go and pay lots of tuition fees to study there without some kind of funding is something that, you know, a select few people can actually afford to do. So the major barrier, in my opinion, is simply the money. And I think the British Council's Generation UK China programme has helped to reduce some of those barriers. Because, without it, I definitely wouldn't have been to China. So, simply put, money.
Kathy?
Yeah, sure. So I had been to China a couple of times before I did the British Council programme, again on study programmes. But I think if it hadn't been for the English Language Assistant programme, I might not have heard of Shenzhen at that point. And it turned out that there's something like 14 million people living in Shenzhen. And in the 6 or 7 years since I went there, it has become, if not a household name in the UK, but at least a city that kind of crops up again and again when you're reading about China. It's a fascinating place. So I think having that exposure to Shenzhen is great. And whenever I read about a new opening or a new technology or a new initiative in Shenzhen, I'm always really, really pleased to see that, and it kind of brings back the fond memories. In terms of barriers, I guess kind of touched on with my previous point, but I think for most people in the UK, China is still a big unknown. So I think that fear of the unknown is valid. I was at an event actually yesterday talking about Chinese tourism. I wasn't talking on the panel, but one of the speakers was saying about how there was an exhibition of terracotta warriors in Liverpool in 2018, and how there is that interest in the UK in Chinese culture, but for a lot of people, they just don't know so much. So I think programmes like the British Council programmes and events like this one today are so worthwhile. And if just 1 or 2 people from here today goes to China, then just kind of talking about it today is valuable.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate both of your points, in that number one, finances can be a big barrier for people. I'm from very much a working class background, and I would have never been able to afford to go to China on an internship had I not gone through Generation UK. I think maybe in the future I would have gone there to travel, but I wouldn't have had that immersive experience of what it's actually like to live and work there. Similarly to what Kathy said, it is a big unknown. The language is completely different to the UK. The culture is completely different. So I think a lot of people especially young people, would be intimidated by that. But like Kathy said, that's why events like this are so integral, because it is absolutely fantastic and you have to go. It's so good. And so I think when people get to meet other people, young people who have been to China, and get that reassurance that you're going to have a great time, just go, then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And just everything you've said, I completely agree with. The kind of the financial aspect, the unknown as well. I think what the British Council do really well, specifically, is before you've even gone, they've built up a real good community of people that are going on different programs. So they have a real strong Facebook group, which when everyone has assumed their scholarship or their internship, everyone's posting who's going to Shenzhen between these dates, and then everyone else is coming to see you there. So you already know a few people before you've actually gone there, and it takes away that pressure of I'm moving to this country where I don't speak the language, I don't know anyone. Actually, now I know a few people that I can meet at the airport perhaps or something. So I think that's something that the British Council does very uniquely, is actually build up that sense of community before you've even gone on your internship or scholarship or language program, to give you a bit more confidence into the opportunity that you're assuming.
Yeah.
So, of course, we've discussed the professional benefits as well, right? So they came up in our interviews. It guided our careers in many ways. But I'd love to understand a bit more from yourselves in terms of the personal benefits. So when you look at your experiences in China, how would you say that's personally affected you and enabled you to grow? Justine?
So I would say, first of all, two things. It's definitely changed in terms of my mindset and my interests. So when I was at university, I didn't really often speak to the international students or the Chinese students because I just thought, oh, we wouldn't have much in common. I'm not sure what I would speak to the international Chinese students about. But now, having come back from China, I'm really interested in the country. I would describe myself as a Sinophile. I love China. So now I'm much more confident when it comes to speaking to native Chinese people, and equally in terms of my interests. Like I've already said, I'm still learning Mandarin at this point. I watch a lot of Chinese TV shows on Netflix, and I read books about doing business in China. So for me personally, I have a whole range of new interests and confidence that I didn't have before.
Yeah, that's great. James?
Yeah, much the same as Justine, I think. It's that sort of cultural agility that you get. So in my case, I'm from quite a culturally homogenous place in the country, in the north. So for me, I never really had any contact with people of different cultures, and I didn't really have the sort of the skills that you need to work with people across cultures, because to a degree there is a lot of skill involved in it. And I think going to China twice really sort of kickstarted that in me. It kickstarted my interest in other cultures, and really in the world itself. So that inspired me to go on to do a degree in international relations, and now, well, Parliament's not exactly the most worldly place, but moving on next into an international affairs policy role, which is starting soon. So yeah, I think it sort of, I'm onto professional again, but it kind of triggered my interest in the world and in different cultures and in travel as well, which then benefited my career, I think. So even on a personal level, it's sort of improving my career.
I think for me, to echo Gary, your introduction as well, and the sense of self-reliance that you get from going somewhere where you possibly don't know anyone, but you make friends, you go to work, you have successes hopefully every day, and it can be quite up and down when you go somewhere that's very alien in terms of the culture, but I think in an almost quiet, creeping way, it really does build your confidence that you can overcome other barriers, either in your work back at home or in your personal life. And I think also because when you think about China, there are 1.4 billion people there, and having that understanding of the culture and the kind of social system and values that the big population of the world kind of lives by and experiences, it really does make you see that there's this whole big world. And London's fantastic. I'm not from London originally, but I think living here for 6 years, you can sometimes think like it's the centre of the world. But there's so much out there. And I think when you're young and there are all these opportunities to go, then if there's nothing tying you here, then just go and experience it. And programmes like this really make it accessible. And you have a lot of support as well in doing so.
Just kind of draw on from Kathy's point there. The world is such a big place, right? There's so many different types of people who all have different types of experiences. We all live the same 365 days in the year, but we all live them so differently depending on where we are. And what I took away personally from the program was a massive growth in my emotional intelligence and empathy. A lot of the times in situations you can see, right and wrong as whatever you decide from your experiences. What I've learned from the program in China is that within that there's understanding, right? So I think what you did is wrong, but I understand why you've done that, and that will alleviate perhaps the hostilities that I might have towards you because of your position. And that emotional intelligence, that empathy growth really has stemmed from my Chinese experience because they are so different from us. And on the program where I was living in China, you're not just living with Brits and then Chinese. There were South Koreans, there were Germans, there were French, there were Dutch, there were Nigerians. We're all living in one space. We're all just collaborating and sharing, and you just learn so much from people, and you learn so many different perspectives, and that just blew up my emotional intelligence, which is a leadership skill, so watch out. So that'll be one thing that really helped me grow personally. Just the final question from ourselves before we open up to Q&A, both in the room as well as online. As we heard from Hannah, that one of the core aims for the Generation UK campaign is to get 80,000 UK students to experience and engage with China. So from your own perspectives, why do you think it's important for young people to do so? Why should people in this room, why should they apply for one of the programs? Why should they go and see China for themselves? We'll start with Kathy.
Sure. So I think for me, the interest in China was actually always quite pragmatic. You open up a newspaper and every day there's some story about China. It might be framed positively, it might be framed negatively, but I think whatever field you study at university or whatever career you enter into, you kind of need to make up your own mind about China. It will impact your work, your life in some way over the next decades. So I think go there, like Gary says, meet Chinese people, learn about their lives, learn that we actually have probably more in common than we sometimes think. And yeah, as we've kind of heard today, that will, I'm sure, benefit you in whichever job you choose to go for.
Yeah, just to build on that, I mean, whatever you think of China, it is a major geopolitical power, and it will have an impact on the UK in the coming years, and it's probably going to grow. Whether you want to work in business, in law, in politics, China will, and China does have a growing role in the world. So you need to learn how to engage with it in some way, I think, whether it's just going there for a few weeks on a cultural exchange trip, whether it's going there for a year and fully learning the language. I think just some experience of China and an understanding of the culture, the business culture, the political culture, the sort of the general culture, really useful. So yeah.
I think just to take that question, I'm going to answer it from more of a business perspective. I feel like whether the UK likes it or not, China is coming. So we need to be prepared.
China's here.
Yeah, China is here, and it's coming. So at the moment, in one of the big things in China, one of Xi Jinping's big plans is for the Belt and Road. So they literally are building the road to Europe. So in terms of, there's a lot of business opportunities there. If you want to work in business in the future, it would be ridiculous if you didn't attempt to tap into the Chinese market. So if you're ambitious in that sense, interested in business, I think it is valuable for you to get an interest in China now, have experience there now. I think it's just good for the UK in general and our economy and our workforce to get familiar, because China works on a scale that the UK doesn't in certain areas. So I think it's important that we all start building on that now.
Just for myself, just to quantify things, right? So the OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they have forecasted that by 2030, right, 66% of the world's middle class will come from Asia broadly, and a lot of that will come from China narrowly. Okay, so 66% of the world's middle class. At the same time, in 2009, that number was around 18%. So you can see how the growth in just what a short time frame is looking like. Taking those numbers, in 2009, the middle class from Europe and North America was at around 59%. And by 2030, that's dropping down to 21%. So you can see what we're going to experience in the next decade is a real intense global shift of power and influence from the West to the East, right? It's happening, and it's going to continue to happen. So it's in our best interest as young people, we're at the beginning of our careers, or most of us haven't even started yet, to start learning about these countries and these economies now, because you're only going to benefit from this in the future. Cool. So that's all the questions that I have from myself, from the panel. I'm sure you're bored of hearing my voice. So what we would love to do is open up Q&A to the people in the room, of course online as well. A microphone, which is at the front here, will be floating around. Oh, we have one there, Nishat has the microphone, so that will be floating around the room. If you do have any questions, it would be great if you could introduce yourself. So your name, where you're from, where you're studying perhaps, as well as if you have any particular questions directed to any of us on the panel as well. And I'll keep an eye out for questions that have come through online too. So any questions in the audience?
Hello, hi. Hi, my name is Mattia. I study at SOAS, University of London. I'm going to graduate next month in International Management with China. I would like to ask a question to Gary first, and then to the rest of you. Sorry, 1 second, I need to take some breath.
That's okay.
And first of all, thanks for sharing your experiences. It's very helpful, especially for some of us who are going to China.
Yeah.
I'm going to go in Shanghai in August. I've asked to work in the business sector.
Amazing.
And I would like to ask Gary first, because you said you have some professional experience with the LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I would like to know if you encountered someone that had this experience in Generation UK, how did they sell their experience, and if you had an employer asking for this particular experience as well.
So could you just repeat the question one more time? Sorry.
Because you said you worked for LinkedIn, right?
I work for LinkedIn.
You work for
I
LinkedIn.
do, yeah.
So I was wondering if you were sort of this professional position that closed the gap between people looking for jobs and people hiring. If you encountered some people looking for job who had this experience in Generation UK, okay. And if you encounter some employer who they were looking for this kind of experience, like professional experience, especially with China.
Okay. So when I got my offer from LinkedIn, I actually hadn't gone to China yet. I'd had my offer to go, but I hadn't started yet. But what the Chinese experience would have done for me in terms of LinkedIn, it was just such a conversation piece in the interview. So it didn't get me the job. It wasn't a recruiting part. I didn't know anyone else from Generation UK who had, or a scholar who had done the program, who had worked there. But it was in the interviews, it was just all they could talk about. Why are you going to China? You could be going to Southeast Asia, Thailand, and all the other stuff, right? Where a lot more other people would go on a gap year. Why are you choosing China? What do you hope to learn from this? So I had very good answers for that. That was just such a pivotal point in the interview process for them when hiring me. So it wasn't so much Generation UK has partnerships with LinkedIn or anything like that, as opposed to when I was actually in the room having interviews. The interest that it had with the panel that I had there and my reasonings for going to China. I hope that answers the question to some degree. Okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay, I wanted to ask to the rest of you, and hopefully if you, Gary, as well, would like to join. Yeah. Any particular experience you had in China, especially if you encounter some adversities, or if you want to give us some advice as well, something maybe to avoid or not to do. I've personally been in China 3 times. I'm going to go again for the 4th, but maybe some people, are going to go for the first time, or someone online as well would like to know some more. So if you would like to share something more personal, for example, I struggled when I had to do a SIM card in China to get online, to get data to go online, and I had to speak Shanghainese. It was a big struggle. So I would like, your personal experience, if you would like to share something with us, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
That's a great question.
I think when I went through CCRC Asia, and they very much kind of spoon feed you through the process, so there was no struggles in terms of like getting a SIM card and things, because they already give you one in a pack. You've got a SIM card, you've got maps, you've got a guidebook. I didn't really have to make much of an effort in that sense. But one of the things that I found challenging, where I worked in particular, which actually I just found more funny than anything, was the business etiquette is different. So, for instance, I went for dinners with the partners of the firm at one point. They were like, "Oh, we'll take this foreign girl out for dinner." And when we were they did a toast at one point, and so I just raised up my little glass and didn't think anything of it. And then the partner told my supervisor, who could speak English, to lower my glass because I'd raised my glass to the same height as his, and to show that he is more senior, my glass should have been lower than his. So things like that kept happening to me. But it's just one of these things where you learn from your mistakes as you go along, and you just kind of have to laugh at them and you learn from them, and it's so interesting as well. And yeah, also when I was at work, people would sleep during lunch, which I just couldn't do. I tried for 2 months to try and sleep during my lunch break, but I just couldn't. But yeah, I think I enjoyed the mistakes that I made. It's a learning curve.
Just to unclear the question, can you repeat
Just kind of
it?
like adversities, perhaps, or challenges that you may have faced when you're in China.
Yeah, so someone mentioned the phone SIMs. Of course, the British Council and CRCC do actually provide you with phone SIMs. I, for some reason, just decided not to use it. And basically spent my entire time in China just sort of guessing where I was going, telling people, I'll meet you at this place at this time, and going there. And then if they weren't there, just having to go home, basically. So it was basically like experiencing life as it was about 100 years ago, or well, about 50 years ago, I guess. So yeah, that was interesting, of course, because it was a new city as well. I was okay at Mandarin, but I'm not actually okay. I'm reasonably decent at it, I'd say. So it was, if I got lost, I could sort of ask a broken question and sort of not really understand what they told me, but be like, okay, thanks, bye. So yeah, that was a real challenge. The other challenge was getting around, I think. I've already mentioned the Beijing metro because I think I'm quite scarred from my experiences on it. It's just very, very, very busy. If you've been on the Northern Line at like 9 a.m., it's like that times 1,000. So I think just the transport, just how busy it was. I like my space personally, and there's just people everywhere, bikes everywhere. It was quite intense in that regard. So I think just general day-to-day living for me was quite heavy. Yeah.
I think for me, so on the day-to-day side, don't be shy about trying to speak a bit of Mandarin. It's always been my experience that people in China are quite forgiving and also very appreciative of you just giving it a go. So don't worry about making mistakes. In the big cities, more people do speak English, especially young people, but not everyone. But I definitely learned to be kind of creative with how I communicate, whether that's kind of gestures and miming or using an app on your phone and working through it. But people are always keen to help you. I found that a lot. And then as a wider point, I'd say if you can, try to get out of the cities in China. That would be a top tip from me. The cities are spectacular. I think we've probably all seen pictures of the Bund in Shanghai and some of the incredible architecture in Beijing. But it was only, I think, in 2012 that more people in China lived in cities rather than in the countryside. So if you want to kind of understand China and how a lot of people experience it, then do try to travel at weekends. Maybe go hiking or to these kind of smaller villages and smaller cities and towns. They might still have a few 100,000 people in them, but they're smaller by China standards. It really kind of enriches your perception of the whole country.
And one for myself would probably be wanting to learn more Mandarin, engaging with Chinese people. This isn't exclusive to China, but what I found was that it's very easy to be, there's almost two groups of people when you're living in Asia perhaps, there's everyone that's Chinese and then there's your expat bubble. And it's quite difficult to get outside of your expat bubble because it's comfortable, and also quite difficult to get into the Chinese group because seldom will they speak English perhaps, or if they do speak good enough English, they might not be confident enough to speak with you. So I found that was quite a challenge, particularly because I wanted to learn more Mandarin. You just have to be proactive. You just have to say hello to everybody. Do you speak English? No? Okay, fine. Let's be friends. That's something that I found was a bit of a challenge, but there's definitely ways to work through that. We do have a few questions online, so I just want to read one here from Damana. She says, hello. I was wondering if you think Mandarin resembles loosely any other European language in your experience. Also, what are some good tips for starting to learn the language? So, I'll start with Kathy.
Sure. Well, I'm by no means a Mandarin expert, but I think my perception is that it doesn't really resemble European languages. There's a different logic, but in some ways that can be easier. I think maybe someone else could correct me if I'm wrong, but at least with the kind of beginner's grammar, it's actually quite logical. I mean, it's very logical, and it's actually quite easy to get your head around it. The tones and the characters are a different story, but there is a romanized version, so using kind of our ABCD, which is called pinyin. So that's how you kind of start to learn Mandarin, by seeing characters that you're familiar with, and then if, I guess, you want to, you can build up to kind of learning the characters.
I would agree with Kathy in that it's not really like any European languages there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. There isn't an alphabet, so it doesn't work that way. There's just kind of 4,000 characters and pictures that you learn and put together. I've just started learning Mandarin again since September, doing classes in London to fully solidify my reading and writing, because before I wasn't learning to read. And for a long time, to me, the characters just looked like sticks. And I just thought, I will never be able to learn this. These just look like different sticks to me. But now that I'm starting to properly relearn it, I'm really enjoying it. And things, like Kathy said, things are quite logical. I find the language very logical. Some things are easier. For instance, in speaking anyway, there's not much of a differentiation between the word for he, she, and them. It's all ta, ta, and ta. The actual character is different. but there isn't really much of a difference between referring to different people, and it's the context that infers what gender there is. So I know with other languages like maybe German or French, there's different feminine and masculine, but that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's that much resemblance between that and European languages, bar some sort of loan words, a few words that sort of travel between the two. And I think that is what makes it quite a difficult language to learn. So when I was first learning to read, I was basically trying to rotely memorize individual characters, and I found that really didn't work because they were essentially just abstract shapes and abstract sounds that didn't really relate to anything in my mind. So I found that what I started to do instead was I would take a few words that I wanted to learn and try and write them in a sentence and sort of give it some meaning and context. And I found that actually really helped having to learn the characters and the words quickly. So yeah, I guess just try and sort of actually use it as a language as quickly as you can rather than just memorize set things would be. Again, I'm really quite terrible at Mandarin, but...
You can buy character books, and as you said, in the character books, they give you about 20 characters, you rewrite them out again and again, and then the pages after that, they put the characters together in a sentence, so then that really, it's a different way of learning, and then you find that you can read entire sentences. So that's a really good way to reinforce character learning.
And I'd say once you're actually in China, you just have to speak with people. Like what you've learned. The good thing about living in China is and studying Mandarin, if you do decide to do that, is that everything that you learn in the classroom you can directly apply the second you leave. If you go to the supermarket or to the cinema, so you can use it straight away. And there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no better feeling than saying something in Mandarin to someone in China, them understanding. That moment's great, and then they reply, you have no idea what they're saying. But even just before they've replied, they understand this. It's such a gratifying moment. So you just have to go out there.
Quite a rare moment too.
Yeah. It's like, I'm actually pretty good at this, and then they reply. Say that again. So yeah, any other questions in the room? Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks again, Gary, and Justine. Right. Just to clarify quickly, what law firm are you at now?
I'm at Pennington's Manshees, and we've just merged, so actually we're Pennington's Manshees Cooper.
Cooper, somebody also, my name's Anthony. I also studied law as well. I was at Manchester, up in the north and so on. I went on exchange to Hong Kong University for part of my exchange semester, and so I got to see, thankfully, Beijing and Shenzhen and Shanghai as on like some holidays in spring break and stuff, and it was really interesting. But for you guys with spending 2 months and plus in China, how did you find it? People come out to you to take photos and to obviously like in that time. For me, every photo I took in front of Tiananmen Square, somebody would photobomb it and act like it was normal or touch my hair. So I was wondering, how did you? I thought to myself it would be difficult. Hong Kong is different because it's very Western, but to spend like a significant amount of time in mainland China, where you're kind of like quite pronounced, shall I say, especially me, you, Gary.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. So I was wondering, how did you guys get by? I applied, also a second question, I applied for Generation UK as well a couple of years ago, but I didn't go through for the internship program because it wasn't completely free. You had to pay for your maintenance and your travel. So I was wondering how much realistically, because now I've been working in the civil service in DEFRA, and I've been doing Mandarin lessons through the Foreign Office. So I've been trying to make myself more noticeable for a training contract like you as well. It's hard, but I was wondering also, like, for you, after this question is like, how did you make a difference just by going to China? Obviously, writing it down doesn't mean that, okay, everyone's going to hire you. But, so how did you make a difference, and how did you guys survive?
Yeah, so just to kind of the second piece on kind of the program, I think we'll save that question perhaps for the British Council guys after, in terms of funding and so forth. How much did you need to save up, I guess, personally? Personally, so British Council did a really good job. They provide funding, so I had a stipend and so forth. So but we can talk about that after. In terms of the standing out, if you like. So I think this is where the emotional intelligence that I developed really came into play, right? Because what I noticed that a lot of the time when Chinese people were coming up to me or taking pictures or asking me questions, it was an innocuous curiosity, right? They weren't trying to be mean or hurtful. They were just interested. You know, they just want to learn more. You've not seen someone like you before, and you're here. Let's engage. So when you understand perhaps why they're behaving the way they do, you can just any kind of hostile behavior or reaction that you can kind of manage that a bit more effectively than an initial "don't touch my hair" or "don't touch me." Why are you doing that? And in this case, I found it was usually quite endearing. So that's how I would have managed myself, and I would have started photobombing their photos as well. It's give and take. So that would be myself.
In terms for me and my friends, I wasn't expecting people to be like, oh, foreigner, take pictures and stuff. It's not as much like that anymore because there are so many international people, especially in the main cities like Beijing and Shanghai. People don't really care anymore unless you go to tourist sites like the Summer Palace, and then people who are in China holidaying in Beijing are like, wow. But it's not, it wasn't as much like that. In terms of your question, in terms of training contracts and stuff, I had a few other things going on in my CV, but I think maybe this was the cherry on the cake, and they thought, I want to meet this person and see what they have to say. And I know in one of my interviews, for the partner interview, you had to persuade them about something, whether it was to go to a place or to read something. And so I wanted to persuade them to go to Beijing. So that's what I talked about. And then that led into a really interesting conversation. Then at the end, the partner shook my hand and he said, you've been really interesting to speak to. So I think it's that sort of angle, how this experience makes you stand out. And then in another one, you had to teach them something. So I taught them Chinese business etiquette, what I had experienced so far. So I think it's just about being an interesting person. To a certain extent, when you go to assessment centres at businesses or law firms, everybody's got the grades. So above that, it's all about the person. So
yeah, that's true.
In terms of being packed, I think it only happened to me once when I was in a froyo place in Shanghai, and they asked me for a photo and then gave me an 80% discount. So yeah, it was like, I was like, fine, yeah, sure. It is. I guess it's quite innocuous, but that's all I've got to say on that. In terms of differentiation, I can't really comment on law, but there've definitely been occasions where I've been in an interview and the person interviewing me has also got an experience of China, and just because there's that link, you kind of do stand out a bit more. And so, for example, I interviewed with someone who had climbed the Great Wall of China 10 years ago. That's quite not a common experience, but like people have done it basically. But because I had these experiences of China, we had something to talk about. It became a conversation rather than an interview. And I think that's a really good thing that can happen in an interview, is where it feels sort of symmetrical rather than you being grilled. So yeah, I think just the experiences of it, you never know in what way it will benefit you. So I think it's just so worth it to have rather than not have.
Yeah, for me, I agree that in the big cities you don't tend to stand out too much. I've definitely been asked to kind of hold babies and have photos taken, and people say I have yellow hair, which is possibly not the right colour really, but it is very friendly and curious and innocuous, I think. I guess one thing that just came to mind is more than once in China I'd be walking in the rain without an umbrella, and a local person would kind of pop up behind me with their umbrella, and I think you get a sense of people often wanting to give you a good experience and make sure you're comfortable in China. I was 22 when I did the British Council programme, and a lot of reaction I had from Chinese girls my age was, oh, you're so far away from home, and wow, and I think there's almost that, and wanting to make sure that you're happy there and that you're experiencing Chinese culture in a positive way. I think the point with Hong Kong versus kind of mainland China, living in Shenzhen gave me great access to Hong Kong. You can take the boat, you can take the metro, you can take a bus, you can take something called the Sky Limo, which is a shared car. But so you can go quite a lot. But for me, I was really glad that I lived in Shenzhen. So I'd go to Hong Kong, I'd buy my British chocolate, I'd go to networking events, but I was happy to kind of come home to mainland China. I found it more interesting. Hong Kong's also very built up, and there are many skyscrapers in Shenzhen, but maybe in some ways because it's a newer city, there are lots of kind of green and open spaces as well. So where I lived was kind of basically built around a big mall, but there were lots of parks, and I think coming from a small town in the UK, it was a real treat for me to just be able to walk 5 minutes out my door, and you've got the bank there, and then you've got kind of Starbucks, and you've got the mall, and 3 cinemas or something. So that was a really kind of, I just really liked living in mainland China, I think. Yeah.
We have a question online as well. It's a question for James, popular. Have the insights you gained on China from your time in country proven useful to colleagues or superiors in Parliament who have not had a similar experience? And that's from Toby on Facebook. I can repeat the question.
You could repeat the question.
So, question for James. Have the insights you gained on China from your time in country proven useful to colleagues or superiors in Parliament who have not had a similar experience?
China specifically, maybe. Obviously, I work for an MP, and the constituency is in Lancashire, which is quite far from China. So we do occasionally have pieces of casework on China, and it's useful to have that insight. So if there's a policy issue, something to do with China-UK international relations, and obviously that extra knowledge is really helpful. But again, I'm just going to go back to the sort of soft skills of it, really. It was the adaptability, it was the flexibility that you gain from being in China that really helps in my job, because everything can change. So I can spend, so for example, I once spent about 4 hours prepping my boss to go on TV, and then an hour before he dropped out. So, it's that ability to not really get too attached to things and to be used to things changing all the time and to very changeable circumstances. So I think that's the main way in which my China experience informs my job, rather than actual sort of country-specific things. It's the soft skills I gained out of being there, really. That was a very political answer, I realised. So, yeah.
And another question online, is that, so Jordan on Facebook. Hi, I was wondering, how does work culture in a Chinese company differ from working in the UK or a Western company? Let's say Justine and Kathy, perhaps.
Very different. So I was in a Chinese law firm, not an international law firm with an office in China. In terms of, I can only speak for a legal perspective, but the law firms, the one that I was at, operated much more like a barrister's chamber. Like, people seemed to be self-employed, and if they had a case, they would say to someone, to their friend, do you want to join me on this? In terms of working life, like I said, at lunchtime, people would either go into reception where there was loads of really nice luxury settees and just lie down in reception and just go to sleep for an hour. Some people would go to sleep on their desk, and then I would just be twiddling my thumbs trying to get to sleep, but I just couldn't. Like I said, a lot of business etiquette differences when you're dining with people. There are different rules. I think there's something about don't stick your chopsticks up in the rice because it represents death. I think giving green shoes, or like something about green, also don't do that because it also represents death. There are quite a few things that represent death in China, and you shouldn't give them in terms of gifts. In terms of like gift giving and stuff, there's certain etiquettes. I think there was another faux pas that I made at work.
It'd be quite interesting, just to jump onto that and kind of align with the work culture, is that you mentioned that a lot of people would be sleeping at their desks or during their lunch breaks. How did that affect your ability to kind of interact and build up working relationships with your colleagues?
Well, at the time, there was 2 other interns, I think, at the time, and me and this other guy who went to Cambridge. He wasn't a fan of sleeping in the break either, so me and him would just usually talk about really interesting things for an hour. But in terms of my colleagues, everyone was really friendly. Okay. Everyone would take me out for lunch every single day, so it wasn't really much of an issue.
Okay, we've got a few more minutes before we wrap up. Any more questions in the room? Brilliant.
Hi, my name is Khadija, and first of all, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I also graduated from SOAS last year, and I'm doing the law conversion at BPP, also applying for a training contract, and I'll be going to Shanghai next month. My question is to you, Justine. First of all, a huge congratulations to secure yourself a training contract. I think us law students just know how hard it is, and when you finally get it, it's like a huge burden off your shoulders. I just want to know a little bit more about the work that you did at the law firm in China, and how that relates to the work that you're doing now. Maybe how has it influenced which seats you're taking as part of your training contract, and if there's similarities. So I don't know if you did like mergers and acquisitions, and if you're doing that now, and just sort of how it relates.
So I would say in terms of the style of work that they gave me, our experiences between the people who are doing the different law courses, because people are sent to different firms. I was at quite a good firm, so on my first day, the woman sat me down and said, what do you want? What do you want to learn? What areas are you interested in? You can't really do actual work because you can't have access to the client's information and you're not qualified. So what my supervisor would do was she would make up scenarios. Some of them were quite... At one point she said to me, can you draft me an acquisition agreement to buy a plane? And so there's nothing to start from. I was like, okay, let's just work out how you write a legal document to acquire a plane. So she would create scenarios for me. I had a lot of drafting. I drafted leases, acquisition agreements, legal opinions, a whole wide variety of things. So it was good in that sense. She also invited me to conferences that they had. There was a class action against a Western company at one point, so I sat at the back of the room while all the various complainants were stating their case and things. So it was really interesting. And just one last point, in terms of going to court there, it depends which judge is sitting and which court you're going to. When I was working there, I was told that I wasn't allowed to go to court because they weren't keen on having foreigners going into the court. So you may sometimes not get court experience, but yeah, it was really useful in terms of drafting, which is real life on the job scenario.
Great. So thank you so much for your time, everybody. We will have to end the panel discussion today. I just want to say a massive thank you to our panelists today. Thank you for the time. And of course, a massive thank you to you all who attended today in the room, as well as all of you guys online that are watching from home or anywhere else. Just before we kind of leave, I just want to let you guys know that there's still opportunities to partner or work with the British Council. We have internship opportunities open at the moment, and that's currently with one of our delivery partners called Intern China. They have placements in Zhuhai, Qingdao, and Chengdu. So if you are interested, there are links online, of course. There'll be a link attached to the recording of this on the Facebook page where you can access more information on that and just a host of information online. So if you are interested in placements in China, please do check that out. And with that, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.